My background is working with adults with learning disabilities, not with adults in higher education. But what we try to do is look at the sort of ways technology can support learners. So can you go and move on, please, Ron? This is a very quick, easy to use. It's a Coggle mind map. It's a very simple one. It's not by no means comprehensive. The link is there for Coggle. The reason I started using Coggle is because I was working in a college which had such old network, PC, you name it, everything. I couldn't get anything else to work, and it's actually part of Google Docs. And it is really easy to use, and it meant I could give half-done mind maps to the staff and say, go and work with the students on this. Okay, so there's a number of ways in which technology can support adults. But if you go to the next one, please, Ron. These are what I'm going to look at very briefly. And this is a bit of a gamble, as it's spring. I thought we'd have a gamble rather than a gallop, through three main areas, which are self-help, enhancing evidence or creating evidence or content, all sorts of things you can call it, and also sequencing. So if you can move on, please, Ron. Self-help. A lot of students on the autistic spectrum, of course, of which there are many within higher and further education, can often find themselves in situations that makes them anxious or uncomfortable. They may have habits or tendencies that are not helpful to others. And social stories, and I've been very good to put a TM next to that because it is trademarked, but they're very, very well used in specialist education. And it's a way of enabling them to cope and overcome anxiety or amend their behaviour in certain situations. And on that link, it'll go to a very simple, you're using a Xerti object now, but it's a very simple Xerti object, which is a social story I did for a young man who really, really couldn't stop interrupting. There's all of 4 or 5 pages, and the nice thing about this is you can actually download them to the local machine. So he didn't have to be online, and he could look at the particular one he needed. He had a few, and go through it, and it would enable him to calm down. And that's the whole sort of ethos of using social stories. If you can move on now, Ron, please. There's lots of other ways that technology can support people with mental health issues or anxiety. There's community support. For example, a big white wall. There are many others of these as well. This is by no means a comprehensive list. This is just my take on things I've used. I sort of need to put that in. WeCroak, which I think is a very strange thing to do, but apparently a lot of people found it useful. You basically get 5 reminders that you're going to die each day. But it's based on a Bhutanese proverb. And it makes you grateful for what you have. I think everybody probably gets calm. I get them all the time in my Instagram feed. For me personally, I've been using YouTube, and I've been doing yoga with a YouTube guy, and it's been amazing. It's been fantastic for me. Again, and I will say this again and again, the best of all of these calming things are ones that are created with and for the students. If you can, work with the student and get them to create their own. Next slide, please, Ron. So moving on from that, customizing and creating their own resources is something I do recommend. And if the student isn't able to make their own resource, involve them. On that slide again, there's another image of a mind map, which was actually done. This is all part of some group work we did about relationships within the college I was working at. As I said, we had to use Coggle because there was nothing else. And then finally, looking at different sorts of, sequencing's next, isn't it? Sorry. this is an example of following instructions. And Alistair and I did a lot of work a few years ago with a wide range of organisations looking at having those sequences available to hand at the right time for students. And this is an example on here in particular was of Doncaster College, where they created recipe cards using augmented reality. So the actual photograph triggered the video. If you click on that, Ron, just you can stop it again. Just click on the YouTube video. And as you can see, it launches you can stop it now, that's all, it's just to show that it launches it. And as part of doing this, I discovered you can actually do screen capture as well on an iPad, because that's how I did that. There's lots of other ways of doing these. You can do them using Xerti, you can use symbols, you could use just the PowerPoint. It really doesn't matter. It's a mindset of how can we use technology to support this particular student. And finally, the last couple ones, enhancing and producing evidence. And by this, I mean some way of demonstrating knowledge, understanding, the ability to explain, show some creativity or develop critical thinking. They can all be done in ways that are alternative to text. That's a picture of Monty. He's a rather splendid saltwater crocodile. And if you click on the interactive Google Images, you can see down there on that image, there's a box at the bottom which will give you a link, which is just to give you an example of using Google Images and drawing instead of, there we go. If you click at the bottom, please, Ron, you can see the link there. There you go. So it gives you a link to a saltwater crocodile. I was just trying to sort of look at an alternative to the fabulous Thing link that is now paid for, I'm afraid. Edpuzzle, there's a link there to a YouTube video. I don't think we need to go on that now, of a guy who's used that for students creating paper aeroplanes. Edpuzzle essentially is something where you get a YouTube video, not your own, any's, and you can add to it, and you can add audio notes, annotations, quizzes. It's a bit confined in that you have to do it within a classroom setting, but within a classroom setting it's fabulous, but it's quite difficult to show in a situation like this. Book Creator, I think, is one of the best, amazing apps available, certainly used a lot in specialist contexts, and in fact there's a link there to a Christmas book creator session that colleagues and I did within specialist colleges to look at ways of using technology. There's the rest are just links to the actual software. So there's Explain Everything and Educreations, both of which are very similar. I'm sure the people who create them would say something quite different, but I think they're very similar. But being able to just talk over an image and explain what you've done really is very, very helpful for consolidation and reinforcement. And Timeline, which is a fantastic website that I've only just discovered and I shall be exploring in much greater detail. And then finally, please, Ron, as part of TechDis, Alistair and I worked in creating some toolbox, a toolbox of short videos, and we had two very, very good contributors to these, and we had a set of free and open source software videos, and there's a link there to the channel, and that's done by our Ron. And there's also one on productivity, loads on productivity, and they were done by our Lils.
Yay.
And I can really recommend you go and have a look at those. They are fabulous, and I won't tell you how long it took us to come up with the title for the procrastination one. Finally, thank you. I think the lesson is, it's not about the technology. It's about looking at something and thinking, oh, I could do. Oh, most of the things I've mentioned today were not designed for teaching and learning, or not designed for individual use for teaching and learning, but you can use them and you can be really creative and make very personalised and individual. Right, I haven't looked at the chat, so I hope there's not lots of complaints. I shall be quiet now.
No complaints, Lisa, but there was a question about, on your sequencing slides, a question from Julian asking what you mean by sequencing. Could you define what you meant?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
So maybe we could go back to that slide, Ron.
So, for example, what's the order in which you have to, I don't know, change the wheel on a bicycle? Okay, so you would need to know what you need to do in what order. So if, for example, I know one college has actually done this, students in horticulture would go along to the garage, and their job that day is to do a service on one of the lawnmowers. Now that sequence will show you exactly what order you have to do things in. Now the benefit of doing it this way with the augmented reality, and in fact the guy who did this has actually got a video of a young man cooking his own tea, and what he did is was able to go back, he'd look at the video, start doing what he was doing, then he'd forget what he was supposed to be doing and go back, and it gives that independence that a student can go and revisit a process or something like that, and it gives them the opportunity, independence, if you like, rather than just a list. It's a bit like a recipe, I suppose, but it's a slightly more advanced and in-depth recipe,